Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a Triad production. I'm your host, Dr. Graham Taylor. With me today is Dr. Jeanne Stanley and Dr. Theo Burnes. Jeanne is a licensed psychologist and is the founder and CEO of Watershed Counseling and Consultation. She also works as a national trainer and consultant. She's a published author and is a professor at the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education in their counseling program. Theo is a licensed psychologist and a professor in the graduate counseling program at the University of Southern California. He also maintains a private practice, is an author, trainer, speaker, and consultant. And he's a member on the California Association for Licensed Professional Clinical Counselors. Together, both Jeanne and Theo help in guiding students through the graduate school process from application to graduation. Jeanne, Theo, welcome to the show. It's so nice to have you here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. We're happy to be here.
Great to have you guys. Hey, I gave our listeners some information about you individually, but help us understand what brought you both together to do this kind of graduate school counseling work in a shared way.
Theo and I were fortunate enough to work together several years ago at the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education. I used to direct the graduate program in counseling there, and then Theo took a position after me. So we were down ends of the hall and we're just always running back and forth, trying to support students in any way possible. So he became an amazing colleague and a wonderful friend.
So nice. So that kind of led to, hey, how can we help these students and graduate students come together? Theo, what was your thinking around that kind of partnership here or shared experience together?
I think one of the things that happened in our time together was that Dr. Stanley and I did a lot of work in admissions, and we did a lot of work with students who were at various stages of the process. And we would often work with some students who had done really amazing pieces of their process. And then we worked with other applicants where we ended up using our interview as almost some career coaching, right, depending on what was happening in the world. And I think as a result of that, and many conversations after some of these interviews, we began to see some best practices and some real needs about the process of applying for graduate school and mental health services.
I think that's maybe a nice segue here, because I know that graduate school coaching, the work you guys do is designed to provide students, with the support and the structure and some strategies that you really work to tailor specifically to their needs in this process. Theo, go back over what you're talking about here. What were some of the needs that you were both seeing in students, or you were seeing in the students, considering graduate school, that led you to kind of say, hey, we can maybe provide them with some guidance here and some help that maybe they don't know that they need?
I think one of the biggest pieces that came up for both of us, and I'm sure Dr. Stanley will have some other thoughts as well, is that when students are applying, often students may not necessarily know exactly what they want or what they're looking for before they enter the process. And so folks may come, let's say, all the way up through an interview portion of their graduate school application process, not being really sure what they want and being distracted by language on websites or hearing certain things in programs, and being able to regurgitate certain pieces, but not really knowing how to connect those pieces to who they are and what they want. So I know for me, and I'm sure Dr. Stanley has had this experience as well, is having that moment where sitting with an applicant and saying, what exactly do you want to do with your life? Dr. Stanley, I don't know if that rings true for you.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why I think we're fortunate to have a counseling background, both of us.
Yes.
And as psychologists, we're okay. And we have especially in career counseling. So we want to take that time and help a student figure out what is best. And that, I always say, it's kind of like that board game life, where if you ever played it, you can go many different ways, but you kind of end up in a similar path at the end. But you want a student or an individual to think of the many different options they have. And I think one of the things we see the most, and Dr. Burnes would be in an interview and someone said, this is the way I was told to do it. My undergraduate advisor said I had to do this type of program. And we're always like, yeah, but what do you want? What is your end goal? I think
that's a really helpful. Yeah, I think it's a very helpful piece. Funny enough, you should say that, Jeanne, that I think back on, I went from psychology to social work back to psychology, and I had a wonderful experience in my master's training with social work. And I'm so glad I went that direction. And then I went to work with the state for about 3.5 years in that field in social work. And it was probably one of the most enjoyable times of my life. However, the kind of work I wanted to do ultimately required, my doctorate in psychology. But I'd wish, as much as I enjoyed this, the social work degree, I wish I had a little more counseling. Probably I should have come to see you guys around what was I thinking in the long term and where that best fit could be. Because I don't think oftentimes students, like you're saying, Theo, really know. Jeanne, I know that pursuing graduate school is a pretty significant undertaking for students, and a good number of students, like you both are saying, don't know what they don't know about the appropriateness necessarily of a graduate school for themselves. So walk us through where you start with those that are seeking your counsel and the areas of specialty that you both help kind of take them through to help navigate this process successfully for them.
The first part is a lot of listening to see, do they have, I always say this, I say, I run into you in 7 or 8 years in line at Starbucks. What are you doing? And
nice.
What do you mean, what am I doing? I'm like, what would you want to be doing in 7 years? What would that look like? Tell me about your day-to-day experiences. And then they get excited. And for some of the first time, they're able to say what they want. Because I think a lot of people will hear, I want to go into this type of program, architecture, or nursing, or but this is what you should do. As opposed to saying, well, what attracts you to that? What specifically do you think you would feel fulfilled every day waking up and being like, I mean, Dr. Burnes and I, we love our work. We actually get up excited to work. Yeah. And so we hope that for other people as well. But first and foremost is being open to getting them to open about what they want.
I really like that. Theo was talking about how sometimes as you go through these graduate school sites and they're really good, but you kind of get lost on some of these things. You really don't even know. It sounds good and it looks good, but what does it actually mean? So you're talking both here, starting out almost with, what is your why in life? Simon Sinek talks a lot about that. The what and the how falls into place once you get the why clear. But a lot of times when we're going through this process, students are looking outside of themselves to see what might be good rather than doing what you guys are encouraging. Let's start within first. Let's do the within work before we do the between work with me and my graduate school, possibly. So let's do that within work first. And then when I get clear about that, then then looking outside sounds like it's going to have a little bit more focused direction. Theo, jump on that for me, would you?
Yeah, I think as Dr. Stanley was kind of talking, one of the things that came up for me was just also thinking a little bit, the metaphor that I often use with clients is a grocery list. So when they're starting that process, what are the things on their list that they want in the next 4 to 5 years? And then really thinking a little bit about what parts of that list are non-negotiable, what parts of that list are flexible, and thinking a little bit about not only where graduate education falls in there, but also what parts of that list are specific to graduate education. So for example, I work with some students who say, based on who I am as a person and my sociocultural identities, a program that I would need to attend would need to be housed in a campus that had this type of student population or had these resources available to me. And we talk a little bit about, is that negotiable or not? Because if it's not, that's really important for you to know before you begin a process.
That's really good. So you're talking there about kind of the goodness of fit, but that goodness of fit gets determined by saying, well, help me understand kind of how you put together or what's going to work for you and what is important and what is non-negotiable and what are some areas that might be kind of negotiable. I would imagine that as you're kind of going through this time, you're trying to assess, is graduate school even a right next step for you? Versus maybe something else you could do. And I would imagine you're looking at certain signs for when it could be a good option. And maybe it's sometimes when maybe graduate school is not a good option for you. Have you had those times when maybe it's not the best fit or good option, next step?
There are many ways to get to where you want to go. And certainly graduate school is not the only way. I think we have to remember graduate school in some ways is a business. So there's marketing involved and we want to be careful not to look at the shiny objects and be like, oh, I need that. Because you don't always need grad school. And several times I'm working with new clients, it's like, have you thought about doing it this way? Because they'll say like, I don't like school, but I think this is what I need. I've been told, well, there are many ways to get there. And that also goes from when you get on somebody's website. I mean, you can have an amazing, Dr. Burnes, I've seen amazing websites, and we know the program behind it isn't necessarily as strong as we would hope it would be for a student, or vice versa. But how often do students say, I have to go there? Did you see that website? Well, yeah, well, what's inside the box is really what is important more than the packaging.
Sometimes those bells and whistles and things that are on those websites are pretty attractive. I got to admit, I was sharing with you guys before the show that my daughter's looking at a graduate school right now, and there's some pretty. I was kind of helping her navigate some of this, like you guys do, and there are some pretty attractive sites out there, and they have all the hooks and bells and whistles. And not saying they're not good programs, but it's easy to kind of get caught up in the bling and the flash, isn't it?
Yes, and our job is to help you get beyond the website too. What is the day-to-day experience for current students? That's another thing we see a lot. We'll see like, oh, yeah, I graduated from that program in 1992 and it was this. Well, that was centuries ago in grad school land. It's probably all new faculty. What is going on now and the here and now is what we really want to hear from current students. And I encourage students all the time to talk to people. And if a program doesn't have current students for you to talk to, well, that's a concern in and of itself.
I like that idea. So let's kind of move through the process. So let's say that you're talking with a student, you kind of find out that the graduate school route's going to be the best thing for them. They have some past success with school. They can manage the rigor. Let's say they've got a good work ethic and they got the ability to balance some things in life. So you're thinking you've got some of the kind of prerequisites within yourself and you've got some of the right fit to go into a graduate school. So we're going to go then, how do you walk them through kind of the best search and the selection process of a school is going to be, again, that goodness of fit? What's the next step? And then the application process that might follow in that.
I think the first thing that I like to really talk to students about is that if graduate school is in your future, let's talk about when in your future it's a good time. Because some folks will feel an immediacy because, as we know from those websites, it's often apply ASAP. And so there's this internalized immediacy that comes from some of that. And what I really encourage us to think about is if we are going into a half-time or a full-time program, how much time do you need to make space in your life for that large responsibility? And so sometimes it's not, I'm going to apply for next fall, but maybe I'm going to apply for 2 falls from now, or maybe I'm going to start to make changes in my life to apply 3 falls from now. And then when we start to think about some of those programs, again, making a list of what are some of the research areas or the things that you're interested in, and making sure that you're going to the literature and really maybe doing some searches at your undergraduate library and asking yourself, who are the scholars that are doing the research in the fields that I want to study? If there are areas that I'm really excited about, who's doing that work? And so the recommendation I make is block a couple hours on an afternoon, hang out at your library or do it online, and just start to notice who are the people, who are the scholars that keep popping up in those engines, and then doing Google searches to figure out where those folks are working and if they're taking on mentees.
What I like that you're saying here is that you're wanting the students to, you're assessing the ability in their work ethic to manage some of the rigor that's kind of an inherent part of graduate school, but you're also kind of encouraging them to put some rigor into the research process here to really make sure this is going to be a good fit, to really find out some things and do some of that work early on, and to have some skin in the game, not just be pointed towards a graduate program, but for them to have some skin in the game around, I've done the work, I see the people in it, like you're saying, Theo, that I really like what this program is putting out. And what you're also saying as well, Jeanne, is I've been able to talk to a couple of students and I see what they're doing. And if they're somewhat like me, I could really see myself doing what they're doing someday as well. And that's going to help me down the road. I know that, going through graduate school has got some different steps to it. The application process, the personal statement, that's oftentimes kind of daunting. Strong letters of recommendation are necessary. Walk us through that initial process of for the student to kind of get their name out there, get in front of ideally an interview board. Talk about the application, personal statement, and the letters of recommendation that you guys really highlight to help them be an attractive applicant.
The first part is to be organized and to have, really keep notes, keep columns, keep in Excel, keep Word, whatever you do it to where you're applying, because it gets pretty confusing when you start looking at programs. You're like, okay, which one had that focus in this, or where was that professor? So right up front, you want to almost have those columns. And I'll give to my clients, like, here's a sheet to start with, and knowing what you're coming in with. So what if you come in, you're allows you to standardized testing, no problem. This is where you are. Wonder if you're great at it and you have that, or wonder if you have this deficit or this part that's really helpful. Knowing what you're bringing in to start with, and not saying, well, I can't do it because, absolutely not. If areas you're not strong, we're going to make other areas look stronger. But from day one, staying organized, keeping notes, because the application, if you just think, as you said, looking at several programs, not just one or two, looking at several where you want to go. And then looking at, what do I need? Standardized testing? Do I need letters of recommendation? Do I need a personal statement? All of these take time. And, individual who thinks they're going to just on a weekend pop this out, the quality is probably not going to shine so well in front of a committee who's done this many, many, many times. And they're looking for people who are committed.
Absolutely. Can I just ping off of that? I want to come back to you, Theo, and kind of have you kind of shade some of this in as well with your experience. But Jeanne, when you talk about the committees that are reviewing these, they've seen hundreds of them, if not more than that, over the years. What are some of the things that committees nowadays are looking for in students coming into graduate school programs that you found that you want to encourage and counsel the people that are working with you to make sure that they include or share and talk about more?
So I think one thing that comes up often is a desire for students to demonstrate some basic understanding of their relationship to the healing profession. And that can be through some self-awareness about what's attracted me to want to be a helping professional. And also being aware that the healing profession is more than just wanting to be somebody's friend, but that there are kind of multiple dynamics to that relationship.
Right.
And that kind of comes through in individuals writing, let's say in a personal statement. It may come through in a letter of recommendation, through work experience. So that even if someone, let's say, has not had any experience in the helping profession, they have done some kind of self-reflection on what their relationship is to that profession and why they're interested, and also what might be some of the challenges. I know that's something that I look for, and that there has been some premeditated thought about what it might be like to enter that field.
That's really good. It kind of takes us back, doesn't it? That you guys start out by doing the within work first before they start doing the selection work. And what you're talking about here is that some of the within work that you helped kind of guide them through some of your questioning and kind of your interested kind of curiosity about them gets to come out in that personal statement, in terms of there are multiple dynamics, in the work that we do in graduate school, and how our personal backgrounds and our own growth and our own self-awareness can actually come into that personal statement in a very healthy and helpful way. Jeanne, any other thoughts? That I know you've been doing this for a while as well, things you kind of see coming into that personal statement?
Well, even before that, or in a personal statement, most programs are looking for people who did their homework.
Yeah.
It's not the best metaphor, but it's kind of like online dating. You would go out on a date, and if you came in and you didn't talk about yourself, or you just assumed you knew who that person was, and I have no questions for you at all, it's not going to work. We want to see people who put thought into, of all these different programs and all these different fields, why X university, why Y university. And the other thing many programs look for across, whether it's an MBA, nursing, medical, psychology, all of these fine arts, they're looking for people who are authentic, who are there for, they really want this, not because the grandfather said they should do this, or not because, hey, what else do I do? I'm a senior. I like school. It's fun. Let me keep it up.
Right.
It's a very expensive it's a lot of investment of time and money to kind of do this willy-nilly. So we want authentically, you want this.
Yeah, I like that piece. I think that's what I'm envisioning you folks doing in your council work with them to make sure that they're doing all of that work so that comes across to those application committees and interviewers that are going to be seeing these folks. I know possibly, in a number of the programs, they also require and request letters of recommendation. How do you encourage folks to go decide who's going to be my best recommender, the someone who knows me in a way that they can convey who I am so that the school can also get a sense of who I am? How do you help them decide that?
This is my 10 o'clock client this morning. And grad school coaching is more coaching than therapy. I think that's an important distinction. It's a lot, of helping the person figure out what they want, but then also listening to what, keeping them on track, keeping it going. And the discussion this morning was, she had 3 people in mind, but 2 of them were pretty much the same person, and they had only had her as a sophomore, and she'd grown so much. I'm like, who are the people now? Who are the people that challenge you? Who have seen you grow? She's like, well, I only got a B+ in that course. I said, that doesn't matter. Would they be able to say, yes, this person grew in their writing, in their analytical skills? Absolutely. That's who you want. And I can't see the importance of asking a person, not, Dr. Burnes, can you write me a letter? But Dr. Burnes, can you write me a strong letter of recommendation? A letter versus a strong letter, a night and day. And some people are too nice and be like, yeah, I'll write the letter. And we'll get these kind of mediocre letters back. And I think that's more danger or damage than a letter that says, here where their strengths, here's where they still need growth.
I like that. That goes back to what you guys were saying. The interviewers want people to be authentic. They don't have to come in as ready-made professionals already. Why would they be coming into a program? Professors, interviewers, all these things they want to say, hey, is this person coming in a way that they're going to be malleable, that they're going to be interested, they're going to be engaged, they're going to be committed. And we want to help them be shaped in the field that we're going to be teaching them. So they don't have to be ready-made already. We want to help them, but they have to have some of the qualities and characteristics that are going to make them good graduate students. And I love this idea of saying who has watched you grow and who might also in a letter of recommendation say, hey, this is what this person's potential is, and here's where they need to grow. It's not that they're already there yet. And to be honest and authentic in that way, that can be really helpful, can't it?
Absolutely. I mean, you don't go to grad school because you know it. You go because you want to learn.
Right.
And that's one of the, we kind of have to help clients dial into that pretty early on.
Yeah.
No, you do. you want to make it clear what areas you want, but that you're open to learning.
Yeah.
And if an individual is a closed system, admissions committees pick that up pretty quickly, and that's not very attractive to them.
Well, let's talk about that in terms of what you're saying here, Jeanne, and Theo, maybe you can take this question. In terms of the admissions interview, what are you seeing those being like? Kind of, take us behind the curtain, and also what are you doing to kind of coach up some of the students going into these interviews to make them feel secure and help them be successful?
So those admissions interviews actually vary a lot depending on the program. And so I like to really inform students that they should really anticipate a variety of different possibilities. It could be an all-day interview where there's multiple kind of components where the applicant is meeting with different people. It could be a really short interview where the entire interview is a group interview where they're with a group of other applicants and 1 or 2 faculty members. And so regardless of what the format of that interview, for me, interview prep really focuses on what are the parts of you that you want people to know and help stand out. So what are the things that you're wanting people to know about who you are? Because I think there's often this kind of myth that in order to do well in an interview, I have to find the quote unquote right answer that the interviewer is looking for and give them that answer. And for me, I actually dial it back and say, that you're doing as much kind of conveying as who you are. And you're also trying to figure out if this is the right program. Like you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. So what are the ways with kind of humility and respect that you're kind of providing a lot of information about you, but you're also asking questions to make sure that this is the right fit for you. And the type of questions that folks are asking are kind of conveying that seriousness that Dr. Stanley was talking about earlier, that the applicant wants to be there. So I do a lot of prep around how are you conveying why you chose this program? So I usually tell applicants, it's probably a good idea when you go to an interview to have some sort of an answer kind of semi-prepared around why this program and why now. And not to necessarily just regurgitate what they wrote in their application, but to really help them think about what is it about this program that's attractive to me? Is it a philosophy? Is it the type of courses that you're taking? Is it the experiential component that happens at a certain point within the program? So really being able to have that prepared as they go into that interview.
That's really good. Those are really some great points in there, Theo. Just for fun, share with us what your interview, each of you, share with us what your interview process was going into your graduate school. Do you remember?
Oh, yeah.
What was it? Oh, yeah. Theo, what was your
Yes,
first?
I do.
Oh, the world has changed. Go ahead, T.
Yeah, no, I actually did my master's and my doctorate at two different institutions. And my master's interview was a group interview with 7 or 8 other folks, where the interviewers were asking us a series of questions. And I remember being really nervous, but I had a really great advisor who really helped me think about the need to pay attention to group dynamics in a group interview and making sure little things like, was I always answering a question first? Was I making sure that I was listening to other candidates? And so it was as much about me being interviewed as it was me being able to kind of play nice with other people. My doctoral interview was a day long and there were multiple components. So I was interviewed by a faculty mentor, by the chair of the program, by a group of students, by the director of training. And there were kind of a series of different interviews that were all a part of a long process. And one of the best pieces of advice that I got was, it's not just about what you bring into the interview, but it's also the physical things that you need with you. So on those day longs, I brought a notebook, and while I was walking in between, I would like furiously write notes so that I would remember stuff. Because after a day, things get really saturated.
You get a little fried.
And then just little things like I brought a granola bar. Because I wasn't sure how much energy I was going to have, and being on for 6 hours, it takes a lot of energy for some of us. And so you need little things.
Absolutely. I said at the beginning of the show, a lot of times, and this is just kind of a natural naivete and kind of an ignorance of the process. We don't know what we may not know about what this process is going to entail. And I really am pleased that you're walking us through this piece as well, because this is where counseling, like what you guys are providing, lets people know things that they would not even think to think about, but sets them up for success nonetheless. So that's quite a grueling process, Theo. Jeanne, how about you? Just real quick, what was your interview process like?
Mine was night and day. My master's was the traditional groups and the interviews and so forth. When I went for my doctorate, it was one-on-one with one professor, and it was the end of the day, and he said, "I'm tired. You all look the same on paper to me. Y'all have great grades. Tell me one thing that's going to make you stand out." And I remember that moment thinking, okay, he wants me to be authentic. I'm not, I had all that list of here's what I'm good at academically. And I said, I have a 4th degree black belt. I had it by age 50. I had my first degree by 15 and by 21, 4th degree, and the second highest rank in the country, female. He said, "You're in."
I love it.
I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, if you can do that, you can get through this program." I said, "Absolutely, I can get through this program. I will get through this program extremely well."
I really like that.
You never know. It's okay. I always talk to people, bring in who you really are. Mm-hmm. If you played an instrument, you have a skill set that you don't think, well, who would care? But it's true. After I did that, I knew I could do this program. It wasn't even a question.
Yeah.
So being back to this piece of being authentic is so important.
Yeah, I really like that. That's what a great question. What's going to differentiate you, and what makes you kind of stand out? Congrats on your belt, by the way. That's pretty significant.
That was a lifetime ago.
That's
But
pretty cool.
Dr. Burnes is so correct about, being in the moment and also looking at the dynamics in the room. We would watch, sometimes we weren't even listening for what the person said, but how they interacted in the group. We're in the helping profession. All the time we need to go seek supervision, consultation. If we were in a group and for an interview and the person kept bulldozing over other people or not listening because they wanted to be first with the answer, that doesn't bode well for, in our work, when we say helping profession, we're literally helping each other succeed.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is, I think it's important to kind of highlight, it's not just, oh, she hit the right answers or he hit the right things to say, we can check that box. It's the process of who the person is and how they are in relationship with other people, regardless of the field you're going to be going into. Talking about going into these various, programs, you also help folks during the, while they're in the program, just in terms of, how to think about, developing relationships with their advisors or a supervisor, or how to be successful in the classroom. Talk just briefly about how to be successful once you're in. What are you encouraging?
I think for me, one of the things that I often tell students who are in programs is to connect with the resources that are available to them on their campus. And so I love to ask students who are new in graduate school, have you visited the Writing Center? Have you made an appointment with a librarian? Have you gone to, let's say, a cultural campus community center or community-based cultural partner? So that there are resources available to you so that you can not only connect with other students of your similar identity constellations, but can find resilience and sources of strength intermittent with your classes. So I think for me, one of the biggest pieces is helping students recognize that there's a life outside of the building that is housed where their program is, because so many students will come to campus, go in a building, be there all day and leave. And so being able to really help them connect so that they recognize all of the built-in places that can support them through their journey.
I really like that. That's almost like, find out where the granola bars are, that are going to sustain you through your time. I really like that. And I think you're right. Sometimes we get into programs and we're just so focused on that building. I know I was in my master's program and I didn't kind of pursue some of the other things that could have enriched my experience in general, but also provided some support to kind of buoy me up during times that were difficult. Really helpful, really helpful. Hey, give me some feedback. We're going to be kind of rounding the corner here, guys, and kind of coming home just in a couple of minutes, but give me a sense of the feedback you're receiving and the success that you're seeing with those that come for your counsel and receive your services as they go through your program and their work with you.
I always, with anyone I work with, I say, my job is to help you get in. My job is to help you get out. So the process, and it's not necessarily later on, coaching them or counseling them when they're in, but to really help them build their success early and to be thinking what the skills you're learning for the application is what same skills you're going to use when you're in a graduate program. Dr. Burnes talked a lot about the research that goes on and finding out about each and every program. And as I said, adding the organizational pieces is quintessentially important. Our clients do really well, but sometimes the problem is, they'll get too many offers and that's overwhelming. And so it's reminding them, Dr. Burnes, don't go back and say, okay, but what, before, again, all the shininess now, because you've been invited, they want you. What do you want? Go back to what you want. And that might have shifted as you've learned more in your interview process, but what is best for you?
Mm-hmm. I like that piece because that's what you're tying in there, Jeanne, what Theo said earlier, that you're also dating them. And, we all, we kind of come into these kind of processes here and we don't want to be rejected. We want to be accepted. That feels better, and that fear of rejection sometimes keeps us, on our heels rather than saying, hey, are you going to be a good fit for me too? I'm going to be here dedicating my time, my energy, my money, et cetera. And I want to make sure that you're going to be the best dating partner so that we can have a good relationship. And I'm going to get from you what I need. So I appreciate that emphasis on making sure that they're the right fit as well.
Mhm.
Theo, with the folks that you're walking through and taking through this process, what are you hearing in terms of their feedback and their success?
So I like to tell students that part of my job is to work myself out of a job, right? In the sense that hopefully you'll get to a place where our meetings become less and less frequent because your time is consumed by so many other things, like all the things that you love doing. And success for me is often measured by the applicant or the current student who during one of our last meetings says, I found the topic that I want to use for my thesis or dissertation, and I'm so excited. And all I can do is read all of these articles, right? So there's a real connection to the learning process because that person has felt supported. They feel like they're in the right place, and they feel as though their courses are really speaking to the why that you spoke about earlier. And that for me is just the best measure of success. That as the kind of sunset happens on our professional relationship, that these folks are really feeling connected to the work and have a clear vision about where they're headed. And they may not know exactly the way that that's going to happen, but they have a connection to a passion within their respective field in terms of the inquiry that they want to create or the practice they want to deliver.
That's really good. I think you might have already started to answer my next question, but I'd like to ask you both. What is it that you find most rewarding, that gets you up every day to be a part of this? You said, Jeanne, you said at 10 o'clock doing this work, very work that we're talking about right now on the show. But what is most rewarding for you at this point as you're seeing yourself being able to have these folks and you're able to come alongside them in a very critical and very crossroads time of their life? What's most rewarding?
It's definitely watching someone connect to what they want and watch that growth happen and that they're starting to listen to themselves and then they're following through on that.
So it's really an alignment. We might even say kind of align with their design. It's kind of helping them align or identify what the design may be and who they inherently are and what's going to be a good fit, and really helping them align with that. I always see that as kind of a win-win-win where we're aligned in that way. We can't help but benefit those that we work with. And in that work, we get our greatest fulfillment. And then we get to give, glory and thanks for the gifts and talents and skills and abilities that we've been given, to steward in this life. So I like that alignment there. That's really good. Theo, you were kind of nodding your head. Did you have a thought around that as well?
Yeah, I'm smiling, and your listeners can't see that big grin on my face because I just got the other day a card from an individual that I worked with who decided not to go to grad school, but instead decided to become a victim support advocate at a local domestic violence shelter.
Nice.
And I got an announcement of her promotion to become an associate director at that center, and the card read, I can't thank you enough for helping me to say no. And it was like, it filled me with such joy because this was an individual who felt such pressure, like we were talking about earlier, to maybe pursue a certain career, and found out that actually what she really wanted to do was to continue the work that she had been doing before she felt that pressure. And just feeling really connected to her vision and passion.
That's so good. That's so good. So that's aligning. That goes back. That's kind of aligning her with her design and where she's going to get the most passion and joy.
That's
and
right.
help those that she's working with. That's so good. That's so
Totally.
good. Hey, just real quick, where do you guys maybe kind of hope or have a vision for the work you're doing? You have any ideas where you'd like to have this grow or where you might like to see this in 5 years?
I don't think growth is our problem. I think for both of us, the problem is it's grown so much that we have to follow our own words of wisdom and stay within our boundaries, what we're great at. There are types of grad schools I don't work with because they're people that specialize and they're better at, like MBA programs. That's a whole world that people working with someone who does MBA graduate work only are really useful. It's making sure we don't burn out by ever working with too many people. So we're pretty selective in who we work with because there's only so much time in a day. And I think with COVID, and any mental health provider you talk to, their waiting lists are off the wall. And a lot of people have been closing up practice in the last year because they didn't along the way say, this is a long haul. How do we follow our boundaries and take care of ourselves? So that being said, there's certain, for me, I work with other programs, not just counseling and psychology. I work with other areas about medical and nursing, and for me, it's the fun of staying up with how fields are changing.
Yes.
Like what we would have recommended working with a client a decade ago in a program would be extremely different now. To that, we're learners. We love to learn. So that's how we grow. When you say how do we grow, it's not necessarily numbers, it's knowledge.
Yeah, I like that piece of it, the excitement about growing and seeing what is kind of changing and expanding just in the various fields. But I also really want to highlight that self-care piece, because you're talking about that self-care piece. My sense of both of you is that you want to bring your best selves to those that you're working with. And the best way to do that is to make sure that you guys are partaking in kind of your own, your own self-care first, kind of your own oxygen mask before you help those around you, to make sure that your best self comes from your self-care first. That's really nicely done. Theo, again, our listeners can't see it, but you're kind of nodding your head and smiling. What are you thinking about in terms of growth?
Yeah, I think that piece around being able to keep the process one where we are continuously just knowing what we can take on and what we can't. There is such a need for individualized experience and attention. And as we've probably kind of gathered by listening to us so far, I think there's such a need to really be able to work with that whole applicant. And so growth for me often is coupled with the idea of not being able to really spend as much time with each person. And because I think that would really dilute the process, that kind of growth does not necessarily feel like an objective for me. But I agree with the idea that growth for me becomes more about examining the evolution of the application process, especially with kind of technological advances and things of that nature, to really ensure that we have the most kind of cutting edge and best practice knowledge to serve applicants in the future.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, guys, we're kind of coming to a close. I would love our listeners to be able to locate you guys and to find out more about you individually, and also how they can connect with you to possibly walk through the process that we're talking about today in selecting a graduate school or making a decision for the next steps in their lives. Share with us, each of you, if you would, share with us how our listeners can get in touch with you, learn more about you.
One of my areas, grad school coaching, is under my overall practice, which is called Watershed Counseling and Consultation Services. So hopefully we can put up the link, so it's easier, because I don't know if people with my Baltimore accent can hear. I'm actually saying water or water.
That's right. So the Watershed program. That's right.
And Theo's on that list as well. But Theo, you have an amazing resources on your website as well for people.
Yeah, so listeners can absolutely find me on my website, which is just theoburnesphd.com. There's multiple ways to contact me and to learn a little bit about my work and process, as well as some resources that might help folks begin to think about the graduate school application process. Really good. As we always do, we'll put those sites up on our site. And so our listeners can go right there and click on and get to see your pages. You both have some really nice sites that are very informative and very clearly explain how you guys so successfully come alongside folks in the work that they're doing. Well, Jeanne, Theo, thanks so much for all you're doing and guiding our upcoming students through their career paths, whether it's going to graduate school, or maybe like you're talking about, Theo, with the one student you worked with, that wasn't her path. And she was so thankful in you helping her be able to say no in a very necessary way. So guys, it's been great to have you on the show today. And thanks so much for being with us. Thanks for having
making space for us. You know, it's what we love to do. So to talk about it and think it through. It's been very exciting. Thank you.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much. I also want to thank you, our listeners, for joining Jeanne, Theo, and me today. It's always great to have you with us. Regarding this episode, I want to remind you that it and its resources and all of our other podcasts can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. So check out our webpage, triadhq.com/BHT, and explore our archive of podcasts and other resource materials. Thanks again for being with us on the show, and we'll look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.